You're watching the TBA Member Spotlight Series. Each episode, TBA President Michelle Greenway-Sellers has a virtual sit-down with members from across the state to check in and chat about topics of importance to the Tennessee lawyer. On today's episode, Michelle talks with Memphis attorney and former executive director of the Memphis Area Legal Services, Harrison McIver.
I am pleased to recognize and introduce Harrison McIver. He retired as the CEO of Memphis Area Legal Services, Inc. He was there for more than 20 years as its leader. And I am just pleased to be here today to talk to Harrison and have him share with us his background and information today. So Harrison, for our members who don't know you, can you share a little bit about yourself?
I want to first thank you and the TBA for giving me this opportunity. I really am honored to do this. I would say I hail from small town in Southwest Georgia called Bainbridge, Georgia. No one has probably ever heard of Bainbridge, Georgia, but it's in the southwestern part of the state. It's about 40 miles north of Tallahassee, Florida. That gives you some kind of perspective. I grew up in the 50s. I was born in the 50s. And I had two loving parents, Harrison and Rose McIver. My father was a salesman and my mother was a teacher. And given that I grew up in a time of segregation and the civil rights movement during the 60s, they instilled within me a work ethic that you had to excel to overcome the impediments of segregation, prejudice, bias, and discrimination. They also taught me a lesson that has continued with me all of my life, and that is taught me not to hate, not to be bitter about circumstances, but to judge each individual on his or her own merit. And that's carried me throughout my life. Also, as a child and growing up during a time when Black youth didn't have much opportunity for little jobs, I worked in the tobacco fields of Georgia for $3 to $6 a day in a 12-hour day. There, I witnessed abject poverty of those who lived, and we still call it a plantation. And these experiences led me to want to choose a career that would address some of the systemic issues associated with discrimination and poverty. And so I saw the legal profession of becoming a lawyer as that vehicle. And I chose Morehouse College in Atlanta, where Dr. Martin Luther King was a graduate. And he was one of the inspiring figures, along with others, that led me to the career that I chose. We had a friend who was very close to my father, attorney C.B. King from Albany, Georgia, not far from Bainbridge. And he was very instrumental in representing Dr. King and others during the civil rights movement. And also Justice Thurgood Marshall. I happened to live in Washington, D.C. when he died, and I got up real early in the morning and was able to attend his funeral. My father also played a key role in my exposure to current events. He wanted to be a lawyer, but it did not pan out for him. And he would have me and expose me to reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, especially on Sunday, where Ralph McGill was the publisher, and he would have an editorial that was very transcending in terms of that period, very much attuned to the issues that were faced and very progressive at that time. And from Morehouse, I went to Rutgers Law School because of its reputation as a place for social activism and change. During the summers, I was assigned to North Mississippi Rural Legal Services, and that was my introduction to the legal profession in terms of actual representation. And afterwards, I was selected as a Reginald Haber Smith Fellow, and I took a job with North Mississippi Legal Services. And 5 years later, I became Executive Director of Central Mississippi Legal Services in Jackson, Mississippi. Those were very significant periods of my life in terms of the practice of law, and to really engage me around what a community lawyer is. Thereafter, I went to Washington. After 14 years, I went to Washington working on a national level for the preservation of legal services. And I was executive director of what was called then the Project Advisory Group, also known as the National Organization of Legal Services Program. And then after 8 years in Washington, I returned south, and that's when I became executive director and later CEO of Memphis Area Legal Services. And after that period, as you mentioned, I retired after 20 plus years.
Harrison, you have held many leadership positions in the Tennessee Bar Association. You have been a member of the House of Delegates for a number of years. You have served on the Strategic Planning Committee, and you're currently on the Diversity Task Force. And I have to say thank you for always being willing, no matter what the ask is. I have to tell everyone that Harrison always steps up. He always says yes. He always has time to serve and offer his time to the profession. And I thank you for that, Harrison.
That's very kind of you. It comes from a good place. I appreciate it.
I really, it is important, and I really do appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about the work at Memphis Area Legal Services and how important that is to West Tennessee.
Oh, indeed. Memphis Area Legal Services, or MELS, is the sole law firm serving the economic poor that provides comprehensive civil legal assistance in those 4 counties. I say comprehensive because within the civil area, it's not limited in terms of the subject matter, let's say, but it has a comprehensive approach to addressing the legal needs of that community. And as I use the term community lawyer, community law firm, it's because MELS is a voice for those who cannot necessarily speak for themselves in the context of the courts. It also engages that community by providing training. We call it community legal education to groups as well as individuals in order for them to learn what some of the pitfalls and schemes and scams that they may be visited with so as to avoid them. Obviously, that is not altogether successful. MELS, especially during my time and probably continuing, held several cases that addressed and positively impacted the Memphis community and changed the landscape in the areas of family, consumer, housing, and education. A couple examples. MELS, not during my tenure, but many years ago, argued a case before the Supreme Court. It was against the utility company here, and it created due process requirements that before the utilities could be cut off, they had to be afforded notice and opportunity to be heard. With that case precedent, we often went to court in order to sustain people's utilities because of the failure on the part of utility companies from adhering to that standard. We also were very instrumental in addressing predatory lending in housing cases during that period when predatory lending was a significant topic. We changed the culture in terms of those kind of questionable practices in our community. we were instrumental in representing disabled individuals who were seeking housing, and when those their housing did not comport with the architectural changes that were needed for them to actually enjoy their home. So those are just some of the examples of the kind of work that we undertook. But this does not happen in a vacuum. It took a team of committed individuals and staff and board support. And I will say this in a very humble way, that the skills that I derived over my time in Washington and elsewhere, I thought prepared me to assume that the leadership of MALS and to address some of the issues that I thought it faced internally. And one of which was that MALS, when I arrived, was basically isolated, choosing not to fully integrate into the legal community. And as such, were not viewed and respected as it reflective of the work that it had undertaken on behalf of our clients. So it was important as its leader to project MALS and to engage our staff to be participatory and to be involved in bar activities. So setting that example as I did and others, we held leadership positions within the Memphis Bar Association, as well as the Ben F. Jones. And I realized that it was important that I move beyond the local bar, but to enjoy the work that was being done by the Tennessee Bar Association. I should say one of the attractions for me to come to Tennessee was the support of the Bar Association, a Supreme Court that supported the work that the equal justice and equal access to justice work, as well as leaders in other legal aid groups that I was aware of and had developed a relationship with, and knew that this would be a place for me to spend the rest of my legal career. So that was that. But we did a lot. We did a lot during this time. We also grew the resources of MALS during that period, of that 20-year period, and I think it continues. When I arrived at MALS, we were raising less than $100,000. And by the time I left, we were raising close to $400,000. And we had attracted other funding and grants and contracts. And we had grown the staff to 50, and over 20 plus lawyers were a part of our law firm. And it was important to say law firm because when you start saying social service agency, and that suggested something contrary to the sort of respect that we were trying to engender. And so consequently, I think by the time I left, I think I handed it over to Cindy, and I assume she's doing a wonderful job. And I'm, a phone call away. We also, just quickly, we had a 30-person board. We reduced it to 21. That was a much more workable board. We moved from not the best professional environment from the Claridge House to the Falls building on the top floor. And it's a professional environment, and people are impressed to work there, and for clients to visit. So we wanted to create that kind of environment. We expanded pro bono and access to justice work with the organized bar as supportive. We created the Saturday Legal Clinic and Courthouse Clinic. And to recognize all of that, we created the W.J. Michael Coley Access to Justice Award that's awarded each year during the bar luncheon or whatever it is now. It used to be a dinner, I think it's still a luncheon. And we were able to, we were presented that award to a law firm, legal department, or individual who had distinguished him or herself or itself because of the work it had undertaken to promote pro bono within their confines. And I want to say this, I want to thank the bar. You probably were involved at the time, you weren't, I guess, in leadership, but at the annual meeting of the American Bar Association in Boston, I was chosen to be the honoree at the reception of the at our reception of the Tennessee Bar Association. In that same meeting, I was presented the American Bar Association Charles Dorsey Award. So that was very touching. My sister surprised me coming from Atlanta, and my wife, of course, was there. So I've had a wonderful experience, and the Tennessee Bar has played a key role in my enjoyment of being here in Tennessee and in Memphis. When people ask me, where are you from? I say, Memphis, Tennessee. I don't give a background on wherever else I've been. I want people to know I'm from Memphis and from Tennessee.
That's wonderful, Harrison. Is there anything that you think that Tennessee attorneys could be doing to help legal services?
Well, of course, continuing, I think we need ambassadors in any context that we could, where people find themselves. One thing it can continue to do to support legal services organizations, law firms in Memphis and across the state by writing a check. Resources are always important. I've worked on a national level and seen the highs and lows of the Legal Service Corporation funding. At this point, it's at a high, but those days are not always guaranteed. So it's important for getting the support of the private bar. And when we go elsewhere and ask for resources from foundations and go to other sort of philanthropic groups, they want to know what is the level of support that you're getting from the legal community. And it's important that be something that can be punctuated. Second, volunteers. I think law firms can volunteer and give their service through various mechanisms that are available. There you have, at a local level, you have just a traditional pro bono assignment of cases. You have individuals or firms committing to doing a particular subject area of the law. You have the Saturday clinics and you have the courthouse clinics. So you have the veteran clinic. So you have every opportunity to give your time back. And I think law firms, it's never enough resources to meet the demand. And given this pandemic, I imagine it's untold the kind of need that's there. So given the trying to avoid any kind of spread, I know that legal services is operating very remotely, and to the extent that these clinical programs and through Zoom and otherwise are very important. I know TALS has the you can either call or through an email. You can ask certain questions, and then they can in turn refer you to the local legal aid program if that's required. So you have a host of opportunities and resources here in the state. So it's important that law firms can do those sort of things, be supportive, be willing to volunteer in other contexts, serving on boards of directors and the like, and being an ambassador for legal aid organizations and law firms across the state. They can do that. And that's important.
As a community leader and a bar leader, what more can we be doing in our profession to champion diversity and move the needle on actual improvement in the profession?
Well, I want to first commend you and the bar for undertaking to create the diversity task force. Given what we've experienced over this last year with the pandemic and how it disproportionately affect people of color and others. And second, what happened with the death of George Floyd, it is quite appropriate, and that's why I commend the Tennessee Bar for undertaking to seek to develop, and those pillars are excellent vehicles for doing that. Some of the other things that I think that can be undertaken, and I think the challenge is, and you've heard the term implicit bias. We all have certain biases, and it's important that we recognize when we have those biases that we can translate that to action that will counter those things that we are more likely to gravitate to. And part of the conversation after we finish this process is going to be important to how we're going to market it to the broader legal community and indeed to the community at large. I think that having more conversations, having us trust us to be ambassadors to go forth in our respective communities, to be advocates to promote the results of the efforts of the four pillars as it's combined to a plan. I think continuing trainings on CLE, as you know, we approved, at least recommended the passage of at least 1 hour of CLE in diversity at the last House of Delegates, and I'm assuming that will pass the board of directors, and from there be supportive of Nashville's initiative in some fashion. But I think it's important to do that. It's also important to engage and promote minority and women bar associations across the state. I think sometimes they feel a little isolated, but I think they are more than willing to join. I know you have tables, Tennessee Association of Black Lawyers as one of the pillars. I think they may have a representation as liaison on the board of directors. I think engaging the organizations in those respective communities and women bar associations as well in those respective communities, very important. I called one of my friends who happened to be a judge, and I asked her a question. Well, her response was, and I applaud you for doing it, trying to get judges and lawyers to move up the ladder in terms of priority for the COVID. I know you've wrote a letter to the governor, and I'm not sure you got much response, but at least I know they probably listen. But once we complete this process, I think it's important that we explain the process, reach out, and communicate effectively, because a lot of, in terms of diversity, there are certain communities across the state, and I think we heard that in the last HOD meeting, that they don't see anybody who looks like me. They don't see any person they would call minority or otherwise. So it's important that that group appreciate as I started off with, was implicit bias, and they will open their hearts and minds to realizing that they can do more and that they can identify. And that's what I try to do, is have people identify with some of the struggles I have, but yet not see that as an impediment of my being a full participant. So that's probably my take on it.
Thank you. Do you have any advice that you would like to give to a new lawyer, or even attorneys who are not new to the profession? You have a lot of insight and experience.
It's important that lawyers, whether they of all perspectives, appreciate what I appreciate, and what you appreciate is the importance of being involved with the Tennessee Bar Association as well with their community. With the Tennessee Bar Association, one thing we did at MALS, and I assume it's continuing, we budgeted money for lawyers to join the Memphis Bar Association, Tennessee Bar Association, and maybe one other. And that was important because moving us from being isolated on that island, it was important that we stand up and say that it's important for us to be involved. And one way to be involved is to support the organizations that represent us. Also, I think young lawyers need to appreciate, and all lawyers need to appreciate, the work that the Tennessee Bar does on Legislative Plaza or at the Capitol, and how our advocacy through the Tennessee Bar makes a difference. That's not, we are a very conservative state. And given that, we can, through the advocacy on the part of the Tennessee Bar, they have ameliorated certain situations that could have been worse, that adversely poor people and the legal community. So communicating effectively with young lawyers and using as a mechanism, and the managing partners and others who might have been involved in the bar, to let them become encouraging their members of their staff who happen to be young lawyers or lawyers who have not heretofore participated to get involved in their community. There's so much need. And I know this community, you're from Jackson, I know there's a lot of need there as well. But there's need no matter whether you're in these demographics or across the state, because this state is within the top 10 or 15 most impoverished states in the country. So it's clear the need is there. So those would be some of the suggestions that I would have, is to encourage participating in the community as well as in the legal community through the Tennessee Bar Association.
Thank you so much, Harrison. And thank you again for all you've done for the profession. Thank you for all you've done for the state of Tennessee. And I am so proud that I got to sit here and talk to you today and got to hear about your background. I didn't know about where you were from. I did know you were from Memphis, but I didn't know about where you grew up.
Right.
So I'm proud to sit here with you today. And again, I thank you for always answering the call, no matter what, and always being willing to serve the profession.
I want to thank you and the Bar Association, and keep it going. You're doing a fabulous job, and just continue to do it. And as long as I'm in good health, I will continue to work and to serve. And that's my motto.
Thank you very much.